What's basic self in 4 minutes? You see the standard icon of self in blue down there at the bottom. And Bowen's saying, okay, look at individuals and look at groups. What's the most important thing? What's the most important thing when it comes to how humans function? Is it beauty? Is it IQ? Is it the ability to be conscious of the unconscious? It could be all kinds of different things. You could list some more. No, he says it's self. The degree of self a person has is the number one most important thing in determining their level of functioning throughout the lifetime, and that a group can have a sort of level of self as well. So here we have 3 different couples who are operating from a different level of differentiation of self. And the 3 different lightning bolts indicates the degree of chronic anxiety that they will carry over their lifetime, all things being equal, which has a gigantic effect on everything. Self impacts everything. Health, relationship quality, success in life, ability to stay goal-directed over time. And there's 2 kinds of self in Bowen theory, pseudo-self and basic self. Here's a simple diagram that catches the basic idea. The red line up the middle is basic self, and the scale from 0 to 100. Could have picked 0 to 10, could have picked 0 to 12. This is an arbitrary scale. No one's really figured out how to measure this yet very well. Although Scouron's doing a good job on science, and a lot of people have become careful observers of it. But here's the basic idea that pseudo-self fluctuates along the basic self scale. So the less basic self you have, the more your pseudo-self fluctuates. You could fluctuate between being a blamer and a self-blamer. You could fluctuate between being domineering and passive. You could fluctuate between being tremendously insecure and arrogant, or over-functioning and under-functioning, as I've depicted here as one good example of how fluctuations will occur at lower levels of basic self. But as you go up the scale, these fluctuations become less and less. So what are these 2 things, basic self and pseudo-self? I'm just going to show you a few quotes. Here's functional self or pseudo-self and its relationship with approval. Soar with the love or dashed by the lack of it. I've been there. And how about basic self? It's very different. It's not negotiable in the relationship system, in that it is not changed by coercion or pressure or to gain approval. It's something very solid, very stable within us. Everyone has some basic self. Here's another quote from Bowen. And this just tracks to my diagram that I showed you. Functional level of self going up and down depending on this relationship context that the individual's in, goes up and down more completely at lower levels of the scale. At higher levels of the scale, there are, quote, almost no functional shifts. So we're all operating, we're all swimming in the fish tank of relationships, whether it's in an organization or whether it's with a wealthy family that we're trying to help, or whether it's an organization we're running or consulting to. And this concept has great applicability for the individuals we're trying to help, and also for ourselves as we operate within the fish tanks we move in. Here's an ancient quote. I think this self, if it's part of nature, radio waves were there long before Marconi discovered them. Self has been around for a long time, long before Marie Bowen was born. Here's an ancient quote that I think poetically describes what basic self is. I particularly like how this quote shows something about the emotional characteristic of a person with basic self, that they're not flat. They can weep and laugh, but inside there's something stable, something steady. They could be in a very emotional person. They could be a very connected person, but there's something subtle inside that's very steady, very stable, very uncaptured, not fluctuating. And my last slide, the classic methods of growing basic self that are in Bowen theory, that are described in the theory and the people who have developed the theory. I'll just give you a time to look at that.